7:38, Nashville Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Thank you very much for joining us. Dan Mandis here, along with Matthew Hurtt, our Grassroots political analyst. Matthew, always great to have you on. And just a bunch of stories that I want to talk to you about. First of all, Ronna McDaniel is apparently going to be out after South Carolina's primary. Not really a shock. You have some folks saying that Kevin McCarthy is going to be perhaps a dark horse in the running to replace Ronna McDaniel. Now, Matt Gaetz, in jest, said this on Twitter. I fully endorse Kevin McCarthy for the RNC chair. Kevin is well organized and a very high revenue fundraiser. He will also be well liked by the RNC committee. The RNC chair doesn't make any policy decisions, set any agenda, or negotiate against Democrats ever. Kevin would be terrific. I'm trying to figure out where Matt Gaetz sits on all this because it sounds a little tongue-in-cheeky, but I don't know. But, give me your thoughts on Ronna McDaniel out and who will replace her.
Dan, it's great to be with you. Last week in Las Vegas at the RNC meeting, there was not a lot of talk about Ronna McDaniel's ouster. This is a surprise from last night. And I really think that had Trump came out over the weekend questioning Ronna's leadership. Had he done that a week earlier, the committee may have been able to select another chairman last week while doing business in Las Vegas. It looks like, and it's funny to see the Kevin McCarthy comments on Twitter. That's the first I've heard of it this morning. It looks like Republican Party chairman and general counsel for the RNC, Michael Whatley, from North Carolina, is likely to be on track to be the RNC chairman. It's a little bit of insider baseball, but he's, being from the general counsel's office, he's got the management ability. He's also a Trump ally. It'd be interesting to see now how this decision is made. And I'm not sure through the RNC rules how they elect a chairman once one steps down. This is the first time since 2017 that we haven't had a chair. And Ronna was elected then, and she's now in her fourth term. And if she's planning to step down after South Carolina, this certainly raises some questions. But the RNC, the membership, was largely supportive of her. They asked questions about the budget last week. But really, leading into the meeting, there were questions about whether or not she should remain as chairman. But those questions stopped when the meeting started. And so this is an interesting development. And I think the front runner is probably Michael Whatley, the chairman from North Carolina.
Well, if she had, and yeah, it is an insider baseball, but if she had the support of a lot of the folks in Las Vegas at the RNC meeting or whatever it was you were at, I mean, then why is she stepping down? Could Trump be behind this? Because we all know that Mitt Romney is her uncle, and he doesn't get along with Mitt Romney at all. But I think they're keeping their powder dry on all that. Why then would she step down? Was this maybe have some Donald Trump fingerprints on it?
Ronna was actually selected by Donald Trump in 2017 to lead the RNC. But since 2017, the Republican Party has had a net loss of 7 governorships, 3 seats in the U.S. Senate, 19 seats in the House of Representatives, and, of course, the presidency. So the narrative over the last 6 months and even to a year in the last election for chairman, when California committeewoman Harmeet Dillon challenged Ronna last January at the RNC meeting in California, this drum has been beat a number of times in the media, by our friends at Turning Point USA, which is a youth movement that is closely aligned with Donald Trump. And it seems that, it has come to a head this week. And this was the point in time where Republican leaders and Donald Trump and the Trump campaign felt they could change horses with, 9 months to go before the election.
Well, then the question is, how will this impact Donald Trump and his run? Obviously, he's the he's going to be the nominee for the Republicans. How does this impact his campaign?
If Michael Whatley is the RNC chairman, if that's who they decide to select as RNC chairman, what I know about Michael is that during his time as chairman in North Carolina, he has dramatically increased small dollar fundraising haul. His email fundraising appeals are he sends them out all the time. And that's really one thing that has hurt the RNC over the last couple of years, is losing small dollar donors, losing even big dollar donors. And so, perhaps Michael, if he's the one, will come in and rebuild that small dollar donor base. Somebody who gives $5 or $10 or $25 to the Republican Party, they can't write a $1,000 check at one time, but what they often do is contribute small dollar amounts, and then they go and volunteer with their local Republican Party or with the candidates of their choice. What we see is somebody with a fundraising background is individuals who are able to invest at that amount oftentimes show up and they'll knock doors or make phone calls. So in building out a small dollar donor base, you actually also build out a volunteer base, and that is excellent for a party that's going up against, $1 billion or more of a Joe Biden campaign machine, where many of his campaign volunteers and others are committed leftists or labor union employees and things like that, where they have this entrenched volunteer base that the Republican Party has to rebuild over the next few months.
One of the more interesting stories out there today, Matthew Hurtt joining us, our Grassroots political analyst. Donald Trump coming out, posting this on social media. The Bud Light ad was a mistake of epic proportions, and for that, a very big price was paid. But Anheuser-Busch is not a woke company, but I can give you plenty that are, and building a list and might just release for the world to see. And he goes on and talks about how, great, Budweiser is and Anheuser-Busch is, and which, that's all fine, well and good. Basically what he's doing is he is calling for an end to the boycott. Now, Politico points out that Trump is doing a big fundraiser with Anheuser-Busch lobbyists. And so he, the cynical side of me is saying, okay, well, he's going to do this big fundraiser. And so right before that fundraiser, he puts out this note on social media calling for an end to the boycott. But I think there's been some conservatives who have decided on their own to end their boycott. Kid Rock just came out, by the way, and did the same thing. But what do you think about, the former president just saying, you know what, it's time to move on?
Bud Light and Anheuser-Busch has two things on their side. The first one is time. The last time Bud Light or Anheuser-Busch took a significant stock hit was at the end of 2019, 2020. And people's political memories and memories are pretty short when it comes to the headlines. And so as we see this, time is on its side. The stock price is stayed pretty consistent. Since 2019, it's bumped up a little bit and stayed pretty consistent at about $60 or $63. But the second thing that Anheuser-Busch has on its side is Donald Trump's radical ability to guide his flock. And so if Donald Trump comes out in favor of Anheuser-Busch and Bud Light in particular, we will see people who have sworn off Bud Light for the last 2 or 3 years come back to the brand. And I think this is probably a good thing for Bud Light. It certainly raises questions, if Donald Trump is doing a fundraiser with Anheuser-Busch lobbyists. The timing on this is pretty impeccable for them. But Donald Trump has a tremendous ability to get out in front of a message and guide his supporters to join him in that cause. So I think, this is certainly not financial advice. I wouldn't give that on this program. But if I was buying stock this morning, I might buy some stock in Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah. Yeah, we have our super text line. I had one person that said that my Trump derangement syndrome is showing. Now, for people that would, because I was talking about this, and basically what I said, I don't know if you heard it, was that it's not up to Donald Trump to tell people what to drink and not to drink. And so you have a lot of people on our super text line actually agreeing with that notion. Matt actually says, I cringe thinking about someone saying Donald Trump says we can drink Bud Light again. I mean, right? I mean, it's not up to the former president, but whatever. I'm going to move on. Other thing I wanted to ask you about was this NBC News polling. It came out on Monday. You and I have not spoken yet, but I mean, there was a lot there, and I covered it extensively on Monday, but you're talking about Donald Trump now ahead of Joe Biden in a general election by 5 percentage points. Clearly, for folks who listened, there's all kinds of things in there. If you're a Donald Trump supporter, Trump looks better and more competent now than he did, back in 2020. And I believe the reason why that is because Joe Biden looks incompetent, among other things. So what are your initial thoughts about the polling from NBC that looked really good for Donald Trump?
This is all part of a narrative, and Dan, you and I have spoken about this before. This is a snapshot in time. The last time we spoke, Donald Trump was down a number of points, showed Nikki Haley head-to-head against Joe Biden with a significant lead. But this is all part of the horse race aspect of this election. As the race tightens, when we get into the summer and more Americans begin paying attention to this election, this will be a razor-thin margin election. A few thousand votes per state is what I'm thinking. But this is, as Donald Trump does better in the polls, he will get more volunteers, more donors, more support. And as Donald Trump, maybe ducks under Joe Biden in the polls as we progress through the summer, he'll lose some of those donors and lose some of that support. So this is sort of that horse race jockeying for as we head toward the finish line, and people in the middle want to invest in a winner. And it's a weird psychological thing with people who aren't as ideological or as tuned into the news. But if people see Donald Trump winning, they may chip in $5 or $25 or show up to their local Republican Party or volunteer for a candidate. And this is great news for a Republican Party that is struggling to raise money and struggling to build out the necessary infrastructure to take on Joe Biden. So right now, it's fantastic news. And Dan, I'll just tell you, I'm a Miller Lite guy myself. So.
Very good. Thank you. Matthew Hurtt joining us on Super Talk 99.7. Yeah, the more that I mention this, the more people are saying, love Trump, don't need him to tell us what to do. And that is what overriding the bottom line is. By the way, I'm not a Bud Light. I'm not a Miller Lite guy. I'm actually not much of a beer drinker, so I'm agnostic on the whole thing about Bud Light. But when I do drink, it's usually Corona. Anyway, how can people find you on social media?
I'm on Twitter at Matthew Hurtt, MatthewHurtt, and over at Substack, I've got some pretty unique insight into the RNC meeting from last week, and I'll keep pushing that out as well.